taught myself to play sitting on the beach at Lake Pedder.
That's the harmonic talent and voice of today's podcast guest, Ian Ross. And this is Pedder Unplugged. Here, some extraordinary people shared their stories of the original Lake Pedder in the heart of Lutruwita, Tasmania's wild southwest wilderness. If you're here, then you'll most likely already know that the globally unique Lake Pedder was flooded in 1972 for the creation of a hydro storage lake. It was an environmental travesty unfolding on an island at the end of the world, but it initiated a global conservation movement. I'm your host, Tabatha Badger, and it was a blast sitting down for a yarn about Lake Pedder with bushwalking legend Ian Ross. When he's not volunteering with Target Tasmania or Wildcare, Ian's assisting the Launceston Walking Club, and he's played a major role in presenting the club's Do You Know Tasmania wilderness slide and film shows. Originally from Brizzy, Ian moved to Tasmania in the 90s, having made several prior bushwalking trips to the state over the years, including one epic in 1971, which took him to Lake Pedder. I hope you enjoy this chat as much as I did. Here's episode 10 of Pedder Unplugged with Ian Ross.
There's lots of memories when I look back of Tasmania in my early days that in looking backwards, I can sort of see that there was various little snippets of Tasmania and the wilderness that popped into my life, and long before I went bushwalking. And one memory that's come back is an aunt of mine was a matron at the Huonville Hospital when I was in primary school. And I remember her coming back visiting for a holiday, and she gave me a Tasmanian timbers ruler, because everyone at school in those days, you had your ruler and your pencil case, but this ruler had a selection of Tasmanian timbers, and it also had photos down the spine of the ruler. And I'm pretty sure there was an aerial view of Lake Pedder in that ruler. Now, I would be very interested to see if anyone's still got one in an op shop somewhere.
It'd be worth a small fortune.
I remember, there were these pictures of Tasmania, and then on top of that, I had a family friend who was into sort of giving lovely books on birthdays, and there were the books of Patricia Wrightson that won the Children's Book of the Year awards, I think, in the 1950s. That I looking back, they certainly shaped my, I suppose, interest in and passion for the bush. And one was the crooked snake. I don't know if you've heard of that story, but it was the one about a group of children up near in northern New South Wales that discovered there was a scenic reserve that was going to be destroyed. And there were these local villains that were going to come in and shoot up the turkeys and kill the wildlife. And this group of children, they decided they would battle these rascals and save this beautiful little area, and eventually got it reserved as a scenic reserve. So that and she wrote another one called, I think, The Bunyip Hole, that had this beautiful descriptions of this deep sort of gully with a waterfall and dripping rainforest and a place where a bunyip could live. Yeah, it's interesting when you look back and you sort of see all these little snippets that you realise have sort of just moved you in a certain direction. Yeah, and this was all before I did any bushwalking at all, because my family weren't into camping or doing more than sort of touristy things on holidays. It wasn't until I started work that a workmate in the late 1960s sort of said, this weekend, my mate and I are going to climb one of the Glasshouse Mountains. Would you like to come along? And I thought, that sounded a pretty neat idea. So ended up climbing Crookneck in the Glasshouse Mountains using basic sort of climbing gear. And I thought, wow, this is something new. Peak bagging or being on top of a top of a little mountain and sort of seeing the views, and just the exercise in sort of negotiating the natural environment. And that led me to join up with the Brisbane Bushwalkers Club that I was a member of for 25 years before I moved to Tasmania. And that's part of the Pedder story coming in now. Because when I first joined the Brisbane Bushwalkers in 1968, it was right at the point when the Save Lake Pedder Committee was becoming very active nationwide in promoting the cause to save Lake Pedder. And I can recall and confirm by looking back at old BBW magazines that it was Carl Clayton's slideshow in 1968, where he was showing images of Lake Pedder and promoting the Save Lake Pedder cause around the country. That inspired a lot of people from the club at that stage to head down to Tassie and sort of do the tour of Tassie and see Lake Pedder and do lots of other walks there before Pedder disappeared. And I was in one of those groups in 1971, where 6 of us over a 3-week period travelled just before Christmas in 1971 down to Tasmania, and we managed to cram. I think we had 17 days in Tasmania, and 15 days of those were bushwalking. We had 3 days in Lake Pedder, Frenchman's Cap in 48 hours or 2 days, and 10 days on the overland track.
Ooh.
And in order to do that, we pre-planned all our food and had packed all of our food for those treks before we left Brisbane.
Oh, goodness. What a logistical nightmare.
in those days, little plastic bags had just come into vogue, and you could sort of apportion out your breakfast cereals and your rice and so on, and put little plastic bags with twist ties and everything packed up very compactly into these 3 bags that we took down with us in the train. The full day we had at Lake Pedder, the weather was nice, and we walked along the entire beach and up onto the Franklin Range up to Terminal Peak. And I took quite a few photos from the top of Terminal Peak, and from there you could see the water backing up behind the Serpentine Dam already in December 71. Yeah, so there was that beautiful view of the lake, but you could see, the water backing up to drown it. And that was sad.
There's some aerial photographs from the land's equivalent department of the day over the Serpentine Valley, just as the Serpentine Dam was closed off. And it's fascinating to see how the water pools around the banks of the Serpentine River. You sort of looking at other views from the Franklands or from around the Pedder Basin, you kind of don't realise how elevated that was and how geographically unique the Serpentine River and the whole valley there is often neglected in the story, but it was so unique and rich in biodiversity. And it was such a shallow valley that's why that created the Serpentine. And when you see those aerial photos, you tended to get the slightly higher tree line following the banks of the rivers, and the shape of the river could be seen as the button grass went underwater. It was delineated by the trees on the banks showing up through the water. And I've got in a Ziploc bag a pair of pink miners socks that I bought at Allgoods. I bought 2 pairs on the way into Lake Pedder, and we were driving down from the Princess of Tasmania in our hire car through Launceston, and I was told these pink miner socks were the thing to wear bushwalking. So, but I've kept one pair that I would have walked into Lake Pedder wearing as a memento. One of the questions is the original Lake Pedder comparable to other southwest Tasmanian destinations? And that was something that had me thinking, and I thought, well, the sort of impact, can I recall any other areas that would run a par with Lake Pedder?
And I came up with two. One is the ballroom forest on Dove Lake.
Yeah.
Which is so unique. And I remember hearing Peter Cundall telling his story about how that was his epiphany when he first visited Dove Lake, being taken there by the locals who just had no appreciation, as he saw it, of the amazing flora in that ballroom forest, where everything had a role to play in the cycle of sort of life and death of the plants. And I remember him saying, he said to his friends, "Can't you see it?" And they, after a while, sort of said, "Yeah, okay, we've been coming here for years and we've never really noticed this." And the other one is Ketchum Bay, down on the south coast, on the trek when you walk down to Southwest Cape.
Yeah.
The New Harbour has got a wonderful camping spot, which I love camping there behind the beach. And Wilson's Bite's got a wild sort of feel to it. And Surprise Bay is, it's got its own features, but Ketchum Bay, with Ketchum Island out in the bay, and you've got this smooth expanse of sand punctuated by these jagged shards of rock coming out of the sand, which is such a contrast between sort of hard and soft and rough and smooth and wild, but the bay sort of encompasses you and you feel safe, as you can be safe in bad weather. And so Ketchum Bay. I'm holding in my hand here my very first harmonica that I brought down to Brisbane, brand new, and taught myself to play sitting on the beach at Lake Pedder. First go at playing. And it's a bit out of tune and battered. I don't play it very often because it's sort of not very tuneful, but I could give you a tune if you wanted a.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. There.
Round of applause.
Yeah, so I'm sort of well known on Launceston Walking Club trips. I'll pull out the harmonica when people are lagging a bit and sort of play them a good tune or two to sort of get the pace moving again. Yeah, and look, another random thing that when walking across the Pedder Plains, one thing that immediately comes to mind is there was a pop tune of the day called "Mammy Blue" by someone called Joel Wade, that probably you could find it on YouTube, but there was this, oh mammy blues, oh mammy blues, and it was just the right sort of pace for plodding across the button grass. And so we made up different words about we're tramping into Lake Pedder. As people did in those days, you took a popular tune and you made up your own bushwalking words to it.
There's a few crackers in the Tasmanian Tramp, the publication from Walking Club, that come through. Oh, they're fantastic, some of the lyrics and poems that people have written in that.
Yeah.
When you went into Pedder, which way did you go in from? Was it across the Huon Plains from Scott's Peak?
It was across the Huon Plains, and I'm in thinking back, I can't remember why that was the chosen route, because there were the two routes in from the Strathgordon Road. It could well have been that had the less up and down. I think it was a little bit longer, but we went from Scott's Peak Dam across the Pedder Plains through to the southern end of Pedder's Beach, and that's the way we went in. And look, there was quite a few people in that period, sort of heading in to Pedder. Yeah, so there was a lot of camaraderie, but there was also a sense of friction. Might have been I'm thinking trying to think of another word. All the workers around Scott's Peak Dam really didn't say a lot when the bushwalkers turned up to park, and there was these signs, don't go this way, don't go that way, keep behind the stakes, warning signs about, basically stay on the track and don't venture away from that. So there was a bit of an introduction to just that tension that was within the community at that time, trying to, I suppose, navigate a solution between economic growth and preserving what once destroyed is destroyed. But then again, we're talking about something that I'm sure that look, if we don't take action to see Lake Pedder restored, nature will do it for us. Any man-made structure has got a use by date.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked about the tension with the hydro workers. They was in the later stages of the construction of the whole Gordon scheme, including the Pedder impoundment, the boom gate at Medina, that people would have to sign on to a clause when they were going walking in the southwest, that they would not damage HEC property, that they understood why Lake Pedder had to be, in inverted commas, modified. All just a huge part of it, and kind of demonstrates retrospectively the power that hydro had. And we're sort of seeing that come around again in more recent times.
Yes. Well, look, I've got all my Pedder photos and also copies of the trip file that is now lodged with the Queen Victoria Community History Museum. After they had a bushwalking expo in 1996, and I mentioned I had all my records still of our trip to Lake Pedder with all the planning information, schedules, and correspondence with the Tasmanian Tourist Bureau and so on. And one of the things that was in that file was the $1 permit from the HEC to enter the Lake Pedder region. And I remember the boom gate where we had to sign on at Medina.
So, that was such an epic trip to Tasmania through some of our most iconic and memorable wild and natural places. How did all of that compare to visiting Lake Pedder as a destination? What made it so unique?
Look, there's nothing anywhere in the world like Lake Pedder. One of the things that continually sort of pops back into memory is when we got to the lake and we wanted to get some water. We actually had to dig a hole in the beach and wait for the silt to settle to actually get a cup of water. I hadn't really comprehended just the nature of the beach was a result of an extremely shallow lake. I think it was only sort of 5-6 meters deep at the Serpentine outfall end. So over a couple of kilometers, the water was so shallow that only every centimeter difference in rise and fall in the lake exposed vast expanses of the beach. And one of our chaps in the group was determined to have a swim in Lake Pedder, but he couldn't. He took his airbed out and we walked out about half a kilometre into the lake where it was about knee deep, and he splashed around on his lilo. Yeah, so you could go a long way out, or you would have to go a long way out before you could physically swim in the lake. So that's why those aerial photos you see of Lake Pedder through the different seasons, the beach varied in its appearance so greatly. because the water the ebb and flow of the seasons just exposed this very shallow sloping sand in sort of magnificent ways every season. And of course, the wind ripples would be different every season as well. So no two aerial photos seem to be the same. And it's just the result of that unique geological situation of the Serpentine Valley and the constant rainfall over the Franklands, creating this lake. Yeah, so it was certainly something unique.
Was it just the one trip that you made into Lake Pedder?
Just the one to see the original, yes.
Yeah.
And yes, and what's made it all the more poignant in the years I've been in Tasmania, when I got to know Melva through my activities with the Launceston Walking Club, and she was talking about their last family trip into Pedder when they walked in only a couple of days after we walked out. And yeah, that was a very special summer.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Launceston Walking Club played such a huge role in starting up the Save Lake Pedder campaign. Of course, Melva and Olegus had both been members of the club initially. Melva in particular, she's an unsung hero of bushwalking.
Oh, yes. And she was an extremely active member. I mean, and some of the early trips that she did when the club was doing various venturous trips. There was one where they went from Modena over the Prince of Wales Range, down the Vale of Rassless, all the way down to Port Davey, I think. Yeah, there were some epic trips she did, and fortunately, there's a lot of photos that were taken by club members that have recorded those trips, and so we do have the stories still, still accessible to keep telling those stories.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's so important to be able to keep passing all of that on. The one thing and how you and I got in contact is through such a platform on the bushwalking.com forum page.
Yes.
And the fantastic thread that you've got on there about the original Pedder and people sharing their stories and generally entering the conversation about restoring Pedder and how that might come from just a concept to reality. What's it been like watching all of that progress from starting just a simple thread?
It's been fascinating, and sometimes something starts off and you've got no idea where it's going to go. And when it's arrived somewhere where you didn't expect, and you look back and you think, wow. I mean, when Nick Sands started up Bushwalking Tasmania in, I think, about 2006, and a lot of the local bushwalkers, we hopped on fairly quickly because that was the era of forums, and that's the way, it was the new thing, how to share information and photos, and but the dear little Bushwalk Tasmania sort of suddenly was overcome by mainlanders and people from around the world wanting to know about Tasmania. So it wasn't long before it had to become just bushwalk.com, and it was became national and almost international. But I think in 2007 there was this thought, when I had my old photos, there was some discussion about memories of Lake Pedder, and I started a thread called The Original Lake Pedder, and put up some of my photos, and this drew a lot of comment, and people started sharing their stories and adding their photos, and so it's become several hundred sort of comments and photos that's become a great resource. And I think as people have shared those stories, it's really just reinforced the fact that look, it was a pivotal time in I suppose environmental history, that in one sense Lake Pedder's demise was the catalyst for so much change that we have been able to see happen today.
Yeah, it's funny how things have to go so far before any real attention is paid to it. And I guess it was the case with Lake Pedder. There was a consensus from a lot of people that there's no way, with the overwhelming evidence, that the government would possibly sacrifice it for a minute amount of power. Yet it happened. Have you visited or spent any time at a new enlarged Pedder impoundment?
Not until very recently. I think when the 50th anniversary came up of our trip into Lake Pedder and the drowning of Lake Pedder, I did have an opportunity to have an extended long weekend in Hobart and thought, will I or won't I? I booked a night at the Strathgordon Lodge there, and spent a day walking around the old track from the Scotts Peak Dam trackhead that goes down to the Port Davey track, but then diverted up to the track that went between Red Knoll and towards the Franklins, and then found the old track and followed it down to the water's edge, and just spent a bit of time reflecting on what I'd done 50 years ago, and hopefully what might change in less than the next 50 years.
Were you purposely avoiding going to the Pedder impoundment?
I think I wanted to hang on to the memories I had of the way Lake Pedder was, and not have that, I suppose, erased or modified by seeing the new one for some time. Yeah, it was, I suppose I wasn't consciously avoiding it, but I was avoiding it. One of the pictures I get, I've got Bob Brown's book open here on the table with a picture of the Franklins and the clouds over the Franklins, and the 3 days we were there, it was cloudy on the walk in, but we had blue sky with just these fluffy white clouds over the beach reflected in the lake. But the Franklins, there was this continual cloud layer raining on the Franklins all the time we were there. And I remember at the time it was just so still, hardly a breeze, and you just get these sort of slight ripples on the water and just a reflection of the Franklins and this cloud layer that was there the whole time. And I thought, unique, that geological environment. You've got the Arthurs and the Franklins that just sort of catch the westerlies and then sort of wring the moisture out, and then the moisture just sort of runs down into the Serpentine Valley. And I think there's a what's that Latin word? There's something called genius loci that I think for me, Lake Pedder will always have this sense of, I think people talk about sort of sacred spaces or thin spaces where you have a sense of something beyond the visible being very close to the visible. I certainly resonate with the Aboriginal respect for country and for place, and that there are special places that you preserve and revere because they bring you in touch with a deeper reality.
That's one of the unspoken things about restoring Pedder, is that the area was never properly surveyed for its significance in terms of Aboriginal culture prior to the flooding.
Yeah.
And obviously it's land that was never seeded, and then land that was stolen and flooded without any consultation. So you just think that what sites could be there that would be revealed when the waters recede again, and the significance that would have for the Tasmanian Aboriginal community.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I think our sort of Western civilization in Australia is only a handful of generations, and prior to that, the Aboriginal culture was looking after the landscape for tens of thousands of years. I mean, when walking around southwest Tasmania, I mean, I've done the South Coast Track, Southwest Circuit, walked in Farmhouse Creek track and so on, and you see all these sort of button grass plains, which are unique to Tasmania, because the South Island of New Zealand has got the same climate, but it has nothing like the variety of Tasmanian spaces, because the Maoris didn't live in the South Island to the extent that the Tasmanian Aborigines did in Tasmania. And so the traditional burning of the button grass plains also was, I think, an integral part of the life cycle of the orange-bellied parrots. I remember seeing an illustration in Gould's Book of Birds about the page on the orange-bellied parrot down at the Allport Museum or Allport Gallery in Hobart some years back, and the comment that he'd painted them from 6 orange-bellied parrots he'd caught in Hobart.
Oh my goodness!
And they were so common, you know, when the first settlements took place. And the fact that the Aborigines no longer did the cultural burning of the button grass meant that the orange-bellied parrots had less and less areas to feed on. So yeah, so it's great to see parks have been doing sort of regular burn-offs around Melaleuca now, and yeah, and I mean I've been down there with the Friends of Melaleuca Wildcare Group, working on Denny's old properties.
It would be such a rightful thing to do for everyone here today to kind of leave a restoring and healing Lake Pedder for the next generation. And we see what lessons were learned, as he spoke about, from the loss of Pedder. Obviously, the Franklin was saved, and it started a global green political movement as well. How restoring nature or committing to restoring it, and it is a very lengthy process, what that would demonstrate to a whole new generation of people about how we leave nature, how we care for it, and fundamentally alter our attitude toward it as a whole. It's very exciting in so many ways. As much as restoring Pedder would be an incredibly complex task, it adds to the intrigue and the excitement of the whole project.
Well, look, I think we are living in interesting times, and I think that's that's a comment that I think many sort of people have said in different times. But I think the interconnectedness we now have through global communications, through the internet, through access to information, I mean, there is so much coming to light now that we can start putting so many pieces together and getting these bigger pictures of events that have shaped our world. And I'm just sort of thinking of all the recent inquiries into abuse that have sort of come through. Stuff that was once hidden now is being exposed, and even look, just in recent days, the comments about the new King Charles III being faced with just a record of colonialism. Is it time to face some of those actions of the past that have had ongoing effect on peoples and countries and Indigenous peoples, and so that our actions do always have consequences, and our future generations have to deal with those consequences. I mean, who would have thought our grandfathers and our great grandfathers would have thought that the day would come when a lot of what they held dear was being challenged, their attitudes, and
and very timely as well.
Yes, but I think it's very positive that I think we are engaging with a lot of things which weren't socially acceptable to bring out into the open. So I think having more open dialogue and people being free to express their views, but moving moving towards a shared future rather than keeping divisive scenarios going is a very positive thing. So I think in some ways, look, I have hope for the future that some of the things that have been done in the past that need to be redressed will be.
That was episode 10 of Pedder Unplugged with the exceptional Ian Ross. What a legend. Huge thanks to Ian for sharing his story and wisdom. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, be sure to rate it on whatever platform you grab your podcasts from. Share it with a friend or on social media. You can learn more about Lake Pedder by following @RestorePedder on all the usual social media channels or at lakepedder.org. Thanks for joining us.